Hello, and welcome to any replayers. Hi, Sabrina Cardini. If you are a replayer, know that you can still participate by tapping on the screen for hearts. You can, of course, share this broadcast with anybody that you think will be interested in this particular topic. Hi, Elizabeth Ann. You can, of course, ask me questions in this broadcast or in any other broadcast. I do a daily broadcast at 10 a.m. And you can follow me on Snapchat and Twitter at joannazarach. Okay, because I love answering money questions. So if you're new to me, my name is Joanna Zarach. I do a couple broadcasts. I do a daily Money Habits broadcast at 10 a.m. Central Time. And I do a Money Matters broadcast. Hi, Hoops, my passion. I do twice a week. I do a Building Bread. I do a broadcast on Money Matters, and I break down like more complex topics when it comes to money. I find that there's a lot of confusion out there when it comes to financial decisions. Hey, good to see you on here. There's so much confusion when it comes to financial decisions, and people make extremely irrational choices, and they lack the information, they lack the proper information, they won't do their research, and typically they kind of sway with what they last heard. And what I'm trying to do is create a little bit more logic in the financial decisions by actually running spreadsheets on every single thing, like every single scenario that someone brings up where they're like, oh, I heard this. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right, So I do the research, I put in a spreadsheet, I do a little factors, variables, and I break it down. So welcome to Money Matters on 529 plan distributions. This actually came up in a group that I talked with yesterday. A lady in the group said, 529 plans, I don't want to have my money limited in how I use it because there's a lot of penalties. And I have 529 plans. And so I'm like, okay, I don't think that's actually true, what you believe or how you're seeing it. So let me actually do some research and then break it down. So I'm using this as a topic for my Money Matters. So actually a great resource to learn more about 529 plans is savingforcollege.com. Here, I'm going to... So savingforcollege.com is a great resource. I actually got it out of a and I was like, okay, they do 529 plans. Let's see what they say. And their information is up to date. Basically, I think there's a great deal of misunderstanding of 529 plans. So let me just back up. Before I talk about penalties, let me actually talk about where 529 plans fit in your financial life. And by the way, if you have any questions, you can feel free to interrupt me during this broadcast at any point in time. So the sequencing of financial choices goes something like this. And again, I know it's kind of individual, but I generalize because I've done the math, and I'm fairly certain that this is the path. There's very, very few circumstances in which you shouldn't follow the general path. If you have double-digit credit card debt, I don't know if there's any other double-digit debt. So typical, what I call double-digit is if your interest is greater than 10%, which means 2 digits or more. The decimal point doesn't count. So if you're 10, 12%, 14%, 18%, a lot of people have credit card interest at 29%, etc. That credit card interest is eating your financial plan alive. You must stop doing what you're doing today and figure out a way to pay off your high interest credit card debt. You need to do that before you even bother worrying about investing or doing anything else. That is after-tax money that's going to a credit card company and not staying in your pocket. So if you are in credit card debt, the first thing you need to do is make yourself a spreadsheet or even write it on a piece of paper, your principal balance on each of those, the interest that you're paying, and you got to figure out a plan. You got to flex your cash flow. Flexing your cash flow means you raise your income or you lower your expenses. There's just no way around it if you're cash flow challenged. Okay. Once you're out of that stage, congratulations. You are probably ahead of a lot of other people in our country because the couple things, you probably have an income that has from a good job, you have training and a good job and skill set that allows you to create an income. And as you know, income is the #1 lever in building wealth. So congratulations to you, and you have some spending discipline. Next thing I'm pushing people to do is invest, become an investor. And the best and easiest way for you to become an investor is to be in tax deferred plans. And by the way, 529 is a tax deferred plan. It is a plan in which your earnings are growing tax deferred. You need to, the easiest thing to do is if you have a job and they have a 401k plan, you need to figure out how you're going to max it out. I know people are like, oh, maybe contribute the match, 3%, 6%. Forget what everybody else says. You just listen to me. You max it out. Max it out. Find an IRA, whatever. If you don't have a plan through your employer, get thanks for sharing this on Twitter, and get an IRA for yourself. If you're still lower enough income to qualify for a Roth, consider that. But if you're cash flow challenged, the traditional IRA will actually do you better because you're cash flow challenged, right? Second, then people start going, people always debate about the paying off debt. If it's single digit debt, I really think you need to max out your tax deferred, or your tax deductible, retirement plans first. Okay, then we come to the 529 plan. So I know if you have kids and you worry about them going to college and you want to have a thing, I appreciate it, but financially speaking, a 529 plan should be the last thing you do. Before, you got to do the interest on your credit cards, then tax deductible accounts, then, all your other retirement accounts, and then look at 529 plans. Why? Because 529 contributions aren't tax deductible. This is good and bad. So it's good because when something's not tax deductible, when you contribute, that money, that principal is safe from any penalties. And I think this is where people misunderstand the 529 plans because they're like, oh no, the government's going to have my money and they're going to tell me what to do with it. Not really, just read the rules. So if you do make contributions to a 529 plan, the return on the investment grows tax-free, which means you're not paying taxes every year on it, on that return of investment. And we're going to look at the calculator, and I'll point out to what I mean. Only the earnings portion, so only the money you make above the contribution, would be subject to any withdrawal penalties on non-qualified distributions. Now, this is a mouthful. What does it really mean? Is if you take money out of 529 plans and use for anything other than education, and those specific laid out things, which are tuition, room and board, books and supplies, and equipment required by the school, as well as if you have a special needs child, any equipment that helps them go to college, those are qualified. If you spend your money on anything else but those items, the government will be like, not so fast. We gave you a tax break on the earnings, and on the earnings, we now required you to pay two things. One is a 10% penalty, that's flat, and the other one is it makes it taxable, the earnings. Again, not the principal / contribution, not your contribution. Those are always safe. And the way the government does it, so you're probably unlikely to take all your money out of the 529 all at once. Why would you take money out of the 529? So the objection I got yesterday was, but what if my kid goes to college, but they don't use up all the money, so there's some money left over? First of all, 529s are awesome. I really do. I think it's I love my tax dodges. I think 529 plans are awesome. I should have started contributing to them before I had kids. But it didn't occur to me to even investigate them. So if you don't have kids and you live in a state that has any sort of state tax income break, and you yourself may want to go to college, to some graduate school or some sort of education, some sort of tuition, you need to, or you think you're going to have kids, or maybe you're going to have nieces or nephews that you're going to be the wealthy uncle or aunt that to support them. That's right. You can switch it to another kid. It is so flexible. I see 529s is one of the most flexible tax plans there is. Right. That's a great point. And so you can switch it over to someone else. The beneficiary right now, actually, because when my kids were born and they were born in October and I didn't have their social security number, I was opening the 529 plan because I was like, oh wait, I get a state tax income break. Oh, this is awesome. That's extra money. I'm like, the state government's giving me money. I'm like, yes. And then I just put myself and my husband I set up two because I had two kids. You can just set up one because you can divide it. And so we're still the beneficiaries on it, not our children. children, and I'm the owner on the accounts. So, so basically, when you're withdrawing, if you don't withdraw the whole thing, the government will, like, there's a formula, how the account, the contribution portion is calculated. So every time you withdraw, you're withdrawing part contributions, part earnings. So those are the two things that will make up your 529 plan as it grows: your contribution portion and your earning portion. And only your earning portion, which is much smaller than your contribution portion, is subject to any penalties, both the 10% penalty and the tax, right? And so this is like, and there's obviously exceptions to the penalty rule. So if the beneficiary, if you have a beneficiary on your account and they die or become disabled, now this is interesting because you can have different beneficiaries, but if that particular beneficiary, whoever that may be at the time, dies or becomes disabled, there's some rule about taking that money out. If your student decides to attend a U.S. military academy, someone mentioned that, like, oh, what if they go to West Point? Exemption from the penalty rule. Now, you'll still pay tax on, I think, on the dividend. I'd have to check it, but that's an exception. If the student receives a scholarship, a scholarship, right? And in the cases, they'll still incur the income tax. Actually, that says that. So the 10% penalty goes away, and it's just the income tax that'll be charged. Again, just on the earnings, the smaller part. Contribution is the majority of it. And so the all earnings of non-qualified distributions are subject to tax as ordinary income at your tax rate at withdrawal, right? So that's actually really, really important when you're kind of thinking through how's that going to go. So the variables in the 529 gains and distribution penalty calculation that we're going to go through, number one is, I always talk about it. I can't emphasize this enough. It's your actual rate of return. And so rate of return is not necessarily what the market does. It's actually what you get to keep after all the fees. That's why I can't I keep hounding people about the low fee option. You've got to find the lowest fee options for your investment because your rate of return is heavily impacted by that. So when you're considering your 529 calculations and comparisons, think about what else will you do with the money, right? Like, so if you had $5,000 and you had to make a decision because you've done all the other stuff, like we skipped over the emergency savings account, but if you've paid off all your other stuff, all your credit cards, you funded your retirement plans fully maxed out, and now you're going, okay, now I'm interested in 529 plans. So which means you, by the way, doing pretty well when you actually should be considering 529 by that time. So what's your option? You're like, okay, I can have a savings account. Like, people save for college and they put their money in a savings account. And I'm like, I just want to do the math. Like, I just want everyone to do the math, right? Money math. It's like math, just with money. And so here, I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so I this today, so it's still a little bit rough because I'm just I'm doing a decade, basically. I'm saying, okay, let's say your kid is 5, maybe you'll put money on a decade. I like round numbers, so I'm giving it 10 years. I say, okay, it's 5,000, you've got $5,000, and I've got this top part where you can go and look at your, let's just put in a box around it. So that's kind of like your savings account. And you said, okay, I'm just going to keep money in a savings account because I'm really, really afraid of the 529 plan. And I put 2%. Let's be realistic. The savings account's making you no money. Like, literally, if you have your money in savings account and you think you're doing something, like, just go. I mean, it's better than nothing, but like, it's really not a way to save for your kid's future. The other thing is, even if you're making a meagerly return on this money, it's still gonna get taxed at your tax rate. And if you're in a position to be funding 529 plans, you are probably in a higher marginal tax bracket than most people. So I put 33%. I didn't put people in the highest. I didn't put 39, but 33%. So basically, over the 10 years in the savings account that you're so proud of, you have accumulated $51,000. And it sounds like you're really just losing money. Of course, right? It's really, savings account are truly like emergency savings. And And even then, like, put him in a CD, for God's sake, you know, like, it's usually like a 60-day penalty on CDs. Just at least put it for 2%. You know, and you always want to have some cash stash, but it's not an investment vehicle. That's right, because you're going to lose money. But people look at it and they see the accumulation and they're like, feel pretty good. I got $51,000, right? Because you put 50,000 in, you got 51. So your gain on this 1% savings rate, 1% rate of return with savings is like less than $2,000, right? And you may say, okay, I'm savvy. I'm going to put it in some sort of like, I'm going to invest it in the markets. And let's say you put 8%, and that's decent, right? Like, so you're like, okay, I'm going to get $17,000. That's right, because your taxes took some money out, but they didn't take all of it out. So you were gaining at 8% and paying your tax rate. You made good decision. This is my why you should have money in a 529 plan. And again, it's before you have it in just a brokerage account. Two things when it comes to contributions. If you live in a state, so I live in Illinois, and Illinois is a beautiful state for 529. They do have you participate and put your money in the Bright Start, which is run by Illinois. But when they say it's run by Illinois, it just means they like administer it, and it just gives you access to Vanguard funds. If you can kind of bypass all of their sales techniques to get you to pay some sort of fee, like a high fee blend where they'll move the money around for you over the next 10 years, just go straight to the self-directed option and get a Vanguard fund, and it literally is like $20. I have 2 Vanguard funds. It's $20 a year because they charge you a $5 flat fee for each fund for every 6 months, right? So anyway, I put this in here just to be fair. And let's say rate of return, some people say 8% is unrealistic, say 7%. Anyway, the thing is that it grows. I put the state income percentage here. And right now, the state income percent in Illinois is 3.75. It was actually even a better deal when it was 5%. But whatever, if your state, and there are certain states that allowed 529 plans contributions to be deducted against their state income, I think you should participate in it because it's like a great contribution to your net worth. Anyway, we contributed the same amount. Your earnings here were $23,842 because at 7%, they grew tax-free. So if you really want to compare the in the same market, but with the taxable account versus this tax-free account, you can see that when we set this rate of return the same, your earnings are 23 versus 14, right? I think this is a pretty good difference. And then people, of course, go with well, what if I need to use this money for something else? Fine, let's take the penalty out. Let's say you withdraw the entire amount for non-qualified distributions because for whatever reason, we do the 10% penalty. Again, that's on the earnings, right? So it's 10% on the earnings. And again, it depends what is your tax rate when you're making the distribution. Now, I would hope that you're clever by that time and maybe your high earning days are over. I put the 33% tax, but if you're in a desperate place and you don't have a lot of income, you're probably in a lower tax bracket, right? Because if you're taking money out of your kid's college account, its times have gotten bad. So your penalty for your taxes might actually be a lot lower. And then, so balance after penalties. So if you take this, what's grown tax-free when you were making good money and contributing and taking out, and now you had to take the penalty and you're in a lower tax bracket, your balance after penalties is 67, versus the 64. Again, this was with the rate of return because we already went past the savings account where you should never keep your money for long-term purposes and investments. And then the return, this is how much you return gain after penalties. So even with the penalties when times are desperate, a 529 plan is better than just keeping your money in a savings account and or even an investment account that doesn't give you any tax protection. And if you add this very nice state tax credit benefit, which means that the state has contributed to your net worth by giving you some money back, on your tax return, which you just absorb into your tax refund or offset some other tax liabilities, that's a good $1,875 on this particular one. Now, if you're maxing it out, you could even get a more. I think in Illinois, it's $20,000 for married people to max out. And so that's That's a pretty nice $750 a year that you can gain from that plan. So that's your total gain. Okay. All spreadsheet where I work on very hard. I probably spend a half an hour to an hour on the spreadsheet to prove a point. To prove a point, to convince people that even with all their objections, this is the right path. Why do I have to do spreadsheets? Because in my head, the math works, right? But like, I don't do mental math. I'm just like, oh, of course, this makes sense. These numbers, like, they speak to me. This is the decision I make. What I'm finding is that, like, one, I have to give people if I walk people through the math, it's actually a much more effective way to convince them to take action, right? Because that's all I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to get people to act differently when it comes to their finances, to set them on the way to build financial independence and build wealth. And there's a very, very logical progression on what to do first, kind of these steps. And so the objection of 529 plans, I'm like, no, it's actually a very good plan, and they've made it very flexible. And no, it's not prepaying college tuition. It's an investment vehicle that you can get at a lower cost if you're smart about it. So bottom line is, if you've done all these other things, so the things you do before 529s is pay off your credit card debt, you maxed out your retirement plans. Of course, you have your emergency savings, and then when you have extra cash flow, however you created the extra cash flow, and you have in the future some idea that someone's going to get education, either yourself, your spouse, your children, your nieces, your nephews, maybe your grandkids, whoever, you open a 529 account. Do that before you do any taxable investments, a brokerage account or anything else. And pretty please do it before you do any crazy, like, high cost, high fee investment vehicles, God forbid, like whole life insurance or annuities, because that's really, really advanced, and that's not for most people. So bottom line is the penalties aren't that big. They're only on the earnings, not the contributions, and there's some exceptions with which you even can get the 10% penalty waived if you qualify. And then you just pay tax like you would have if you had an investment that was just in a brokerage account. But this protects your growth. And again, there isn't it's like a lot of other tax vehicles, you have to start taking money out at a certain point. 529 is actually a nice way to maybe pass that wealth to your next generation. And as long as they use it for education and that's one of your values, then they get to use it tax free, which I think is pretty awesome. So thank you for joining today and for participating. And if you have any questions, or if you're not convinced and you want a little bit more proof in the pudding, but check out your 529 plan that's in your state. Pick out the lowest cost option, just bare bones, do it yourself, look for a Vanguard fund, plug your money in there, and watch it grow. Yeah, thank you. And I think, it's like, that's the stage of life I'm in, because I have kids, and I feel like it's like I'm trying to get other parents to really get a handle on their finances, because kids really blow it up. And I feel like 529 plans are one of the most misunderstood saving and investment vehicles that are out there. And I wish more people would participate, because they're really good. But, if you're still struggling with the first 3 layers of financial plan, then I get it. It's going to be really hard. But then you got to focus on the other basic stuff before you start thinking about 529. Use your mental energy where it needs to be used, where it needs to pay off the credit card, fund your retirement fully, max it out. And college isn't getting any cheaper. I know. I'm like, I started putting money in when the kids were born. I call it maxing it out, because I think it's better to actually put it every year to get the state tax break than it is to just try to put a whole big chunk in one year, because you're not gaining that, you're not capturing that really nice state income tax deduction, which I think people overlook. And that's a pretty high percentage of return, immediately. And I feel like that's way overlooked. So I'm a big fan of free money, and government likes giving it away. You just need to know where to look for it, right? So thanks a lot. And tomorrow morning I'm on, my daily money habits is at 10 a.m. Central, and I will be doing a Friday Money Matters at 5 o'clock on a topic. I don't know. We'll see what comes up in discussion when I get inspired by people's questions, when I talk to them and they like come up with something and I'm like, that's not logical. I know the family can contribute, or if your family lives in a state that has the 529 state deduction, they can set up a plan. And you can I know with Bright Start, you can send people links instead of birthday gifts to be like, hey, contribute to my kids, 529 plan. It's way, way more valuable than yet another tchotchke in your house that, the kids won't play or like. So they've made it really easy. And I just feel like people are underutilizing it, but mostly because they don't understand. And saying that, and a lot of people cash flow challenge because they're just divert their cash flow to things that are not returning and not having any rate of return. So become an investor instead of a consumer, or switch your mindset from just a consumer mindset to an investor mindset. Thanks a lot, guys. I will see you on another scope. Bye.